Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome back to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books. What can I say? The reading of Srila Prabhupada's books, the way we're doing it, with the association of Vaishnavas who are eager to hear, everyone in the room. You know, when you're giving a class or you're having a session and some people in the room aren't into it, it's harder to speak, it's harder to read, harder to think. But in these settings, everyone's into it. And it's so easy, and it's getting sweeter and sweeter as we go along. So I'm just one lucky fella. I'm a happy camper, as we say in America. Do they say that in England? Happy camper? We do. And we welcome all of you from cyberspace. Thank you for coming. We're going to start right off reading Srila Sanatana Goswami Prabhupada's Srimad-Bhagavatam Mahima Stotram, his glorification of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, stunning, deep, sweet, enlightening prayers, 5 of them, from his very sweet book, Sri Krishna Lila Stava. In case you want to look it up in a book, it's texts 412 through 416, almost at the end of the book. And the book was glorifying the Krishna Lila of Vrindavan. So it's super sweet. Doesn't get any sweeter. You know, Dwarka is sweet, then there's more sweet, then there's the most sweet. Perfect, more perfect, most perfect. So here we are. And it goes like this. Sarva Shastrabdipi Yusha Sarva Vedaika Satpala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnaja Sarva Lokaika Drik Prada. O nectar of all from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths. You are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavata Prabho Kaligdwanduditaditya Sri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master, Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. Does that mean, O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees? Does that mean if it isn't your life air that you're not a devotee of the Supreme Lord? We might want to interpret like that. Try to attract more people into the fold. Paramananda Pataya Prema Vakshaksharayate Sarvada Sarvasevyaya Sri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. Madeka Bando Matsangin Madguro Man Mahadana Man Nistada Magbhagya Madananda Namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu saduta dayin adini chochata kada anamuncha gadachin mam premna ritkanta yospura. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay. heard about pastimes of Krishna with his cowherd boyfriends. When he's out in the forest, Krishna has been glorifying Vrindavan forest through his brother, Lord Balaram, noticing how the living beings, birds, beasts, trees, creepers, foliage, all are worshipping Lord Balaram in various ways. And then we heard how Krishna decided it was time for Balaram to do something, so they went to the Talavan forest, and cowherd boys demanded, basically, that you go there and kill this demon that's stopping us from going there and tasting these sweet fruits in Talavan forest. And now, Krishna has found his cowherd boys and some calves dead, having drunk the water of this lake within the Yamuna that had been poisoned. So there we pick up the action. Chapter 16, summary. Krishna chastises the serpent, Kaliyah. This chapter describes Lord Sri Krishna's pastime of subduing the serpent Kaliyah within the lake adjoining the river Yamuna, and is showing mercy to Kaliyah in response to the prayers offered by Kaliyah's wives, the Nagapatnis. To restore the purity of the Yamuna's waters, which had been contaminated by Kaliyah's poison, Lord Krishna climbed into a kadamba tree on the riverbank and jumped into the water. Then he began fearlessly playing within the water like a maddened elephant. Kaliyah could not tolerate Krishna's trespassing upon his personal residence, and the serpent quickly went up to the Lord and bit him on the chest. Whoa, serious. When Krishna's friends saw this, they fell down on the ground unconscious. At that time, all sorts of evil omens appeared in Braja, such as earth tremors, falling stars, and the trembling of various creatures' left limbs. The residents of Vrindavan thought, today Krishna went to the forest without Balarama, so we do not know what great misfortune may have befallen him. Thinking in this way, they traced the path of Krishna's footprints to the bank of the Yamuna. Within the water of the lake, adjoining the river, they saw Lord Krishna, the very essence of their lives, enwrapped in the coils of a black snake. The residents thought that the three worlds had become empty, and they all prepared to enter the water. But Lord Balarama checked them, knowing well the power of Krishna. Then Lord Krishna, seeing how disturbed his friends and relatives had become, expanded his body greatly and forced the serpent to loosen his grip and release him. Next, the Lord began playfully dancing about on the serpent's hoods. By this wonderful, boisterous dancing, Sri Krishna trampled the serpent's 1,000 hoods until his body slackened. Vomiting blood from his mouths, Kaliyah finally understood that Krishna was the primeval personality. Lord Narayana, the spiritual master of all moving and non-moving creatures, and he took shelter of him. Seeing how very weary Kaliyah had become, his wives, the Nagapatnis, bowed down at Lord Krishna's lotus feet. Then they offered him various prayers in hopes of gaining their husband's freedom. It is quite fitting that you have brought our cruel husband to this condition. Indeed, by your anger, he has gained great benefit. What piety Kaliyah must have amassed in his previous lives. Today, he has borne upon his head the dust of the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead, the attainment of which is difficult for even the Mother of the Universe, Goddess Lakshmi. Please forgive the offense Kaliyah has committed out of ignorance and allow him to live. Satisfied by the Nagnapatni's prayers, Krishna released Kaliyah, who slowly regained his sensory and vital powers. Then Kaliyah, in a distressed voice, acknowledged the offense he had committed, and finally he offered Krishna many prayers and said he was ready to accept his command. Krishna told him to leave the Yamuna lake with his family and return to the Ramanaka island. Some people think that's Fiji. Prabhupada made a statement like that. I was in Fiji for a year, almost a year. And there's a place on top of the mountain there. And they say that's where the Kaliyah lives. And people don't go there, and people that have gone there have not come back. It says here, this is a very interesting statement. Kaliyah acknowledged the offense he had committed. There are certain politicians in the world now that they can't admit, even if they make a big mistake, they can't admit it. Does that make them worse than Kaliyah?
Yes.
More poisonous?
Yes.
Wow. Okay then, text 1. Shukadev Goswami said, Lord Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, seeing that the Yamuna river had been contaminated by the black snake Kaliyah, desired to purify the river, and thus the Lord banished him from it. Text 2. King Parikshit inquired, O learned sage, please explain how the Supreme Personality of Godhead chastised the serpent Kaliyah within the unfathomable waters of the Yamuna, and how it was that Kaliyah had been living there for so many ages. Text 3. O Brahmana, the unlimited Supreme Personality of Godhead freely acts according to his own desires. Who could be satiated when hearing the nectar of the magnanimous pastimes he performed as a cowherd boy in Vrindavan? 4. Sri Shukadev Goswami said, within the river Kalindi, Yamuna, was a lake inhabited by the serpent Kaliyah, whose fiery poison constantly heated and boiled its waters. Indeed, the vapors thus created were so poisonous that birds flying over the contaminated lake would fall down into it. Purport. In this regard, the Acharyas explain that the Kaliyah lake was situated apart from the main current of the river. Otherwise, the Yamuna's waters would have been poisonous even in the cities like Mathura and in other places farther away. 5. The wind blowing over that deadly lake carried droplets of water to the shore. Simply by coming in contact with that poisonous breeze, all vegetation and creatures on the shore died. Purport. The word stira, unmoving creatures, refers to various types of vegetation, including trees, and jangama refers to moving creatures such as animals, reptiles, birds, and insects. Srila Sridhar Swami has quoted a further description of this lake from the Sri Harivangsha, Vishnu Parva, 1142, 44, and 46. The Sri Harivangsha is very old scripture. Even the scholars admit that it's very old. And it is considered to be an appendix to Vyasadev's Mahabharata. Dirgham yojanavistadam dushtaram tridashayarapi gambiram akshobhya jalam nishkampam ivasagaram dukopas sarapam tideshu sasarpayar vipulayar bilahi visharani bhavasyagner dumena pariveshditam trineshwapi patat swapsu jwalantam ivatejasa samantad yojanam sagram tirdeshwapi durasadam. The lake was quite wide, 8 miles across at some points, and even the demigods could not cross over it. The water in the lake was very deep, and like the immovable depths of the ocean, could not be agitated. Approaching the lake was difficult, for its shores were covered with holes in which serpents lived. All around the lake was a fog, generated by the fire of the serpent's poison, and thus the powerful fire would at once burn up every blade of grass that happened to fall in the water. For a distance of 8 miles from the lake, the atmosphere was most unpleasant. Srila Sanatana Goswami states that by the mystical science of Jalastamba, making solid items out of water, Kaliyah had built his own city within the lake. This is not an ordinary snake. Text 6. He's a biggie. Lord Krishna saw how the Kaliyah serpent had polluted the Yamuna river with his terribly powerful poison. Since Krishna had descended from the spiritual world specifically to subdue envious demons, the Lord immediately climbed to the top of a very high kadamba tree and prepared himself for battle. He tightened his belt, slapped his arms, and then jumped into the poisonous river. Purport. According to the Acharyas, Lord Krishna also tied back the locks of his hair as he prepared to do battle with Kaliyah. 7. When the Supreme Personality of Godhead landed in the serpent's lake, the snakes there became extremely agitated and began breathing heavily, further polluting it with volumes of poison. The force of the Lord's entrance into the lake caused it to overflow on all sides, and poisonous, fearsome waves flooded the surrounding lands up to a distance of 100 bow lengths. This is not at all amazing, however, for the Supreme Lord possesses infinite strength. Text 8. Krishna began sporting in Kaliyah's lake like a lordly elephant, swirling his mighty arms and making the water resound in various ways. When Kaliyah heard these sounds, he understood that someone was trespassing in his lake. The serpent could not tolerate this and immediately came forward. Purport. According to the Acharyas, Lord Krishna was producing wonderful musical sounds within the water simply by splashing his hands and arms. Text 9. Supremely clever. Kaliyah saw that Sri Krishna, who wore yellow silken garments, was very delicate, his attractive body shining like a glowing white cloud, his chest bearing the mark of Shivats, his face smiling beautifully, and his feet resembling the whorl of a lotus flower. The Lord was playing fearlessly in the water. Despite his wonderful appearance, the envious Kaliyah furiously bit him on the chest and then completely enwrapped him in his coils. Text 10. When the members of the cowherd community who had accepted Krishna as their dearmost friend saw him enveloped in the snake's coils, motionless, they were greatly disturbed. They had offered Krishna everything, their life, their very selves, their families, their wealth, their wives, and all pleasures. At the sight of the Lord in the clutches of the Kaliyah snake, their intelligence became deranged by grief, lamentation, and fear, and thus they fell to the ground. Purport. Srila Sanatana Goswami explains that the cowherd boys, along with some cowherd men and farmers who happened to be in the vicinity and who were also devotees of Krishna, fell to the ground just like trees that had been cut at the root. 11. The cows, bulls, and female calves, in great distress, called out piteously to Krishna. Fixing their eyes on him, they stood still in fear, as if ready to cry, but too shocked to shed tears. Text 12. In the Vrindavan area, there then arose all three types of fearful omens: those on the earth, those in the sky, and those in the bodies of living creatures, which announced imminent danger. Purport. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, the omens were as follows. On the earth, there were disturbing tremors. In the sky, there were meteors falling. And in the bodies of creatures, there was shivering, as well as quivering of the left eye and other parts of the body. These omens announce imminent danger. 13 to 15. Seeing the inauspicious omens, Nanda Maharaj and the other cowherd men were fearful, for they knew that Krishna had gone to herd the cows in that day without his elder brother, Balarama. Because they had dedicated their minds to Krishna, accepting him as their very life, they were unaware of his great power and opulence. Thus they concluded that the inauspicious omens indicated he had met with death, and they were overwhelmed with grief, lamentation, and fear. All the inhabitants of Vrindavan, including the children, women, and elderly persons, thought of Krishna just as a cow thinks of her helpless young calf. And thus these poor, suffering people rushed out of the village, intent upon finding him. 16. The Supreme Lord Balaram, the master of all transcendental knowledge, smiled and said nothing when he saw the residents of Vrindavan in such distress, since he understood the extraordinary power of his younger brother. Purport. Shri Balarama is the plenary expansion of Lord Krishna and is thus non-different from him. They are, in fact, the same absolute truth, manifest in separate forms. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur, Lord Balarama was laughing because he thought, Krishna never cares to play with me in my form of Sheshanaga. But now he is playing with this ordinary mundane snake named Kaliyah. The question may arise as to why Krishna and Balarama allowed their loving devotees to suffer such great anguish during Krishna's temporary imprisonment within the coils of Kaliyah. It must be remembered that because the inhabitants of Vrindavan were completely liberated souls, they did not experience material emotions. When they saw their beloved Krishna in apparent danger, their love for him intensified to the highest degree, and thus they merged completely in the ecstasy of love for him. The whole situation has to be seen from the spiritual point of view, or it will not be seen at all. 17. Let's say that again. Let's fix this in our mind. This is really a beautiful point. When they saw that their beloved Krishna in apparent danger, their love for him intensified to the highest degree, and thus they merged completely into the ecstasy of love for him. The whole situation has to be seen from the spiritual point of view, or it will not be seen at all. 17. The residents hurried toward the bank of the Yamuna, in search of their dearmost Krishna, following the path marked by his footprints, which bore the unique signs of the personality of Godhead. 18. The footprints of Lord Krishna, the master of the entire cowherd community, were marked with the lotus flower, barley corn, elephant goad, thunderbolt, and flag. My dear Parikshit, seeing his footprints on the path among the cows' hoofprints, the residents of Vrindavan rushed along in great haste. Purport. Srila Sanatana Goswami comments as follows. Since Lord Krishna had passed along the path sometime previously, why weren't his footprints, which were surrounded by those of cows, cowherd boys, and so on, smudged over and brushed away? Why hadn't his footprints been obliterated by those of the beasts and birds in Vrindavan forest? The answer is indicated by the word Vishpati, master of the cowherd community. Since Lord Krishna is actually the wealth of all living beings, all the inhabitants of the forest of Braj would carefully preserve his footprints as great treasures, the very ornaments of the earth. Thus no creature within Vrindavan would ever walk upon Lord Krishna's footprints. (19) As they hurried along the path to the bank of the Yamuna river, they saw from a distance that Krishna was in the lake, motionless within the coils of the black serpent. They further saw that the cowherd boys had fallen unconscious, and that the animals were standing on all sides, crying out for Krishna. Seeing all this, the residents of Vrindavan were overwhelmed with anguish and confusion. Purport. In their grief and panic, the residents of Vrindavan tried to find out whether Kaliyah had forcibly dragged young Krishna from the shore into the water, or whether Krishna had himself jumped from the shore and fallen into the clutches of the snake. They could not understand anything about the situation, and Krishna's cowherd boyfriends, being unconscious, were unable to tell them anything. The cows and calves were crying out for Krishna, and thus the whole situation was overwhelming and created a state of shock and panic among the residents of Vrindavan. 20. While the young gopis, whose minds were constantly attached to Krishna, the unlimited Supreme Lord, saw that he was now within the grips of the serpent, they remembered his loving friendship, his smiling glances, and his talks with him. Burning with great sorrow, they saw the entire universe as void. 21. Although the elder gopis were feeling just as much distress as she, and were pouring forth a flood of sorrowful tears, they had to forcibly hold back Krishna's mother, whose consciousness was totally absorbed in her son. Standing like corpses, with their eyes fixed upon his face, these gopis each took turns recounting the pastimes of the darling of Raja. That she is a little bit, there's too much time, space between she and Yashoda, her Krishna's mother. (22) Lord Balaram then saw that Nanda Maharaj and the other cowherd men who had dedicated their very lives to Krishna were beginning to enter the Serpent's lake. As the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Balaram fully knew Lord Krishna's actual power, and therefore he restrained them. Purport. Srila Sanatana Goswami explains that Lord Balaram checked some of the cowherd men by speaking to them, others by physically holding them, and still others by casting upon them his potent, smiling glance. Distraught over the situation, they were prepared to give up their lives for Lord Krishna by entering the Serpent's lake. 23. The Lord remained for some time within the coils of the serpent, imitating the behavior of an ordinary mortal. But when he understood that the women, children, and other residents of his village of Gokula were in acute distress because of their love for him, their only shelter and goal in life, he immediately rose up from the bonds of the Kaliyah serpent. 24. His coils tormented by the expanding body of the Lord, Kaliyah released him. In great anger, the serpent then raised his hoods high and stood still, breathing heavily. His nostrils appeared like vessels for cooking poison, and the staring eyes in his face like firebrands. Thus the serpent looked at the Lord. 25. Again and again, Kaliyah licked his lips with his bifurcated tongues, as he stared at Krishna with a glance full of terrible, poisonous fire. But Krishna playfully circled around him, just as Garuda would play with a snake. In response, Kaliyah also moved about, looking for an opportunity to bite the Lord. Purport. Lord Krishna moved around the serpent so skillfully that Kaliyah could find no opportunity to bite him. Thus the snake was defeated by Sri Krishna's transcendental agility. 26. Having severely depleted the serpent's strength with his relentless circling, Sri Krishna, the origin of everything, pushed down Kaliyah's raised shoulders and mounted his broad serpentine heads. Thus Lord Sri Krishna, the original master of all fine arts, began to dance. His lotus feet, deeply reddened by the touch of the numerous jewels upon the serpent's heads. Purport. Sri Harivansha states, Shiraksa Krishno Jagraha Swahastina Vanamya. Krishna grabbed Kaliyah's head with his hand and forced it to bow down. Most people in this world are quite reluctant to bow down to the Supreme Person, the Absolute Truth. In the contaminated state called material consciousness, we conditioned souls become proud of our insignificant position and are thus reluctant to bow our heads before the Lord. Yet just as Lord Krishna forcibly pushed Kaliyah's heads down and thus defeated him, the Supreme Lord's energy in the form of irresistible time kills all conditioned souls and thus forces them to bow down their arrogant heads. We should therefore give up the artificial position of material life and become faithful servants of the Supreme Lord, enthusiastically bowing down at his lotus feet. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that Lord Sri Krishna's lotus feet became red like copper because of their contact with the numerous hard jewels upon the heads of Kaliyah. Lord Krishna, with those glowing reddish feet, then began to demonstrate his artistic skill by dancing on the unsteady, moving surface of the serpent's hoods. This extraordinary demonstration of dancing skill was meant for the pleasure of the young women of Vrindavan, who at this phase of their relationship with Krishna were seriously falling in love with him. There's a pastime in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita when Gopakumar finally makes it to Goloka Vrindavan and he's learning all about what it's like there. All of a sudden, Kaliyah shows up. This is in Goloka Vrindavan. Yeah. And he's there and he watches as all the Brajbasis come there and they all fall down unconscious. And Krishna must have given him some special mercy because he wasn't unconscious. He's just a newcomer. I don't know, for whatever reason. And then Krishna, taking advantage of the situation, the gopis were coming, but they kept falling and running, falling and running. So they got there last. So by the time they got there, everyone else was unconscious. So Krishna just reached out his arms, picked them all up at once, brought them up, and had a rasa dance on the Kaliyah's hoods with all the gopis. At Krishna. Text 27. Seeing the Lord dancing, his servants in the heavenly planets, the Gandharvas, Siddhas, sages, Charanas, and wives of the demigods, immediately arrived there. With great pleasure, they began accompanying the Lord's dancing by playing drums such as mridangas, panavas, and anakas. They also made offerings of songs, flowers, and prayers. Yeah. Purport. When the demigods and other residents of higher planetary systems became aware that the Lord Sri Krishna was personally putting on a wonderful demonstration of the art of dancing, they immediately came to offer their services. Dancing becomes more enjoyable and beautiful to watch when it is accompanied by expert drum playing, singing, and the chanting of prayers. The artistic atmosphere was also enhanced by the showering of a multitude of flowers upon Lord Sri Krishna, who was blissfully engaged in dancing upon the hoods of the Kaliyah serpent. 28. My dear king, Kaliyah had 101 prominent heads, and when one of them would not bow down, Lord Krishna, who inflicts punishment on cruel wrongdoers, would smash that stubborn head by striking it with his feet. Then as Kaliyah entered his death throes, he began wheeling his heads around and vomiting ghastly blood from his mouths and nostrils. The serpent thus experienced extreme pain and misery. Well, when you dish it out, you got to take it. Sometimes people can dish it out, but they can't take it. 29. Exuding poisonous waste from his eyes, Kaliyah would occasionally dare to raise up one of his heads, which would breathe heavily with anger. Then the Lord would dance on it and subdue it, forcing it to bow down with his foot. The demigods took each of these exhibitions as an opportunity to worship him, the primeval personality of Godhead, with showers of flowers. 30. My dear King Parikshit, Lord Krishna's wonderful, powerful dancing trampled and broke all of Kaliyah's 1,000 hoods. Then the serpent, profusely vomiting blood from his mouth, finally recognized Sri Krishna to be the eternal personality of Godhead, the supreme master of all moving and non-moving beings, Sri Narayana. Thus, within his mind, Kaliyah took shelter of the Lord. Purport. In chapter 16 of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Srila Prabhupada points out that whereas previously Kaliyah was vomiting poison, now his poison was exhausted and he began to vomit blood. Thus, he had been cleansed of the vile contamination within his heart that had manifested as serpent's venom. The word smritva, remembering, is very significant here. The wives of Kaliyah were actually serious devotees of Lord Krishna. And according to the acharyas, they had often tried to convince their husbands to surrender to him. Finally, finding himself in unbearable agony, Kaliyah remembered his wife's advice and took shelter of the Lord. Who says women are less intelligent? Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that Kaliyah's arch rival had traditionally been Garuda, the carrier of Vishnu. But now Kaliyah realized that he was fighting an opponent who was thousands of times stronger than Garuda, and who therefore could only be the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus Kaliyah took shelter of Lord Krishna. 31. When Kaliyah's wives saw how the serpent had become so fatigued from the excessive weight of Lord Krishna, who carries the entire universe in his abdomen, and how Kaliyah's umbrella-like hoods had been shattered by the striking of Krishna's heels, they felt great distress. With their clothing, ornaments, and their hair scattered in disarray, they then approached the eternal personality of Godhead. Purport. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Kaliyah's wives had been disgusted with their husband because of his demoniac activities. They had been thinking, if this atheist is killed by the punishment of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then let him be killed. We will become widows and engage in the worship of the Supreme Lord. But then the ladies noticed Kaliyah's facial expression and other bodily features, and they understood that Kaliyah had indeed taken shelter of the Lord within his mind. Seeing that he was manifesting symptoms of humility, remorse, regret, and doubt, they thought, just see how fortunate we are. Our husband has now become a Vaishnava. Therefore, we must now endeavor to protect him. They felt affection for their repentant husband and severe distress because of his miserable position. And thus, all together, they went into the presence of the Supreme Lord. 32. Their minds very much disturbed, these saintly ladies placed their children before them and then bowed down to the Lord of all creatures, laying their bodies flat upon the ground. They desired the liberation of their sinful husband and the shelter of the Supreme Lord, the giver of ultimate shelter. And thus they folded their hands in supplication and approached him. 33. The wives of the Kaliyah serpent said, "The punishment this offender has been subjected to is certainly just. After all, you have incarnated within this world to curb down envious and cruel persons. You are so impartial that you look equally upon your enemies and your own sons. For when you impose a punishment on a living being, you know it to be for his ultimate benefit." 34. What you have done here is actually mercy for us, since the punishment you give to the wicked certainly drives away all their contamination. Indeed, Because this conditioned soul, our husband, is so sinful that he has assumed the body of a serpent, your anger toward him is obviously to be understood as your mercy. Obviously. This is how we should see the distress of this material world. Whenever we're in distress or difficulties or whatever, we should see it as the mercy of the Lord. Purport. Srila Madhvacharya points out in this connection that when a pious person suffers in this world, he realizes the punishment of the Supreme Lord is meting out, the punishment the Supreme Lord is meting out to me is actually his causeless mercy. Envious persons, however, even after being punished by the Lord for their purification, continue to envy him and be resentful, and this attitude is the reason for their continued failure to understand the absolute truth. 35. Did our husband carefully perform austerities in a previous life, with his mind free of pride and full of respect for others? Is that why you were pleased with him? Or did he in some previous existence carefully execute religious duties with compassion for all living beings? And is that why you, the life of all living beings, are now satisfied with him? Purport. In this regard, Srila Prabhupada comments in his Krsna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, chapter 16. The Nagapatnis confirm that one cannot come in contact with Krishna without having executed pious activities in devotional service in one's previous lives. As Lord Krishna advised in his Shikshastika, one has to execute devotional service by humbly chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street, and not expecting honor for oneself, but offering all kinds of honor to others. The Nagnapatnis, not expecting the Nagnapatis. I lost my place, I'm sorry. Oh, I found it. The Nagnapatnis were astonished that although Krishna had the body of a serpent as a result of grievous sinful activities, at the same time he was in contact with the Lord to the extent that the Lord's lotus feet were touching his hoods, a blessing that must certainly be the result of extraordinary pious activities. Is that different than yours?
Yes.
Yeah. This is marked with yellow. It was a correction that was made. What does yours say? Let's test this.
Certainly this was not the ordinary result of pious activities.
A blessing that must certainly be the result of extraordinary pious activities. That was put back in properly by the editor that we know and love, Jayadvaita Maharaj. These two contradictory facts astonish them. "36. O Lord, we do not know how the serpent Kaliyah has attained this great opportunity of being touched by the dust of your lotus feet. For this end, the goddess of fortune performed austerities for centuries, giving up all other desires and observing austere vows. 37. Those who have attained the dust of your lotus feet never hanker for the kingdom of heaven, limitless sovereignty over on earth, the position of Brahma, or rulership over the lower planetary systems. They are not interested even in the perfections of yoga or in liberation itself." Text 38. O Lord, although this Kaliyah, the king of the serpents, has taken birth in the mode of ignorance and is controlled by anger, he has achieved that which is difficult for others to achieve. Embodied souls who are full of desires and are thus wandering in the cycle of birth and death can have all benedictions manifested before their eyes simply by receiving the dust of your lotus feet. Purport. It is very rare for a conditioned soul to free himself from the contamination of illusion and thus become established in perfect consciousness of the absolute truth. And yet this benediction was achieved by the serpent Kaliyah because the Lord personally danced upon the serpent's hoods with his lotus feet. Although we conditioned souls may not receive the mercy of having the Lord dance on our head, we can receive the dust of the lotus feet of the Absolute through the Lord's representative, the bona fide spiritual master, and thus go back home, back to Godhead, forever freed from the misery and ignorance of the mundane universe. 39. We offer our obeisances unto you, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although present in the hearts of all living beings as the Super Soul, you are all pervasive. Although the original shelter of all created material elements, you exist prior to their creation. And although the cause of everything, you are transcendental to all material cause and effect, being the Supreme Lord. Purport. The beautiful Sanskrit poetry of this verse should be chanted out loud for the transcendental pleasure of the reciter and the hearer, so therefore I should dutifully follow the instruction of my spiritual master and chant that lovely Sanskrit for the pleasure, for his pleasure, and the pleasure of all those who have ears to hear. Namastubhyam Bhagavate Purushaya Mahatmane Bhuta Vasaya Bhutaya Paraya Paramatmane. We offer our obeisances unto you, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although present in the hearts of all living beings as the Super Soul, you are all pervasive. Although the original shelter of all created material elements, you exist prior to their creation. And although the cause of everything, you are transcendental to all material cause and effect, being the Supreme Soul. 40. Obeisance unto you, the Absolute Truth, who are the reservoir of all transcendental consciousness and potency, and the possessor of unlimited energies. Although completely free of material qualities and transformations, you are the prime mover of material nature. Purport. Those who consider themselves intellectual, philosophic, or rational should carefully note here that the Absolute Truth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the ocean of all knowledge and consciousness. Thus, surrendering unto the Supreme Lord does not entail giving up the method of rationally comprehending reality. Let's say that again. Those who consider themselves intellectual, philosophic, or rational should carefully note here that the Absolute Truth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the ocean of all knowledge and consciousness. Thus, surrendering unto the Lord does not entail giving up the method of rationally comprehending reality. Just the opposite, you are rationally comprehending the reality. Rather, one merges into the ocean of rational, logical comprehension. The Supreme Lord is the perfection of all sciences and the forms of and all forms of knowledge, and only envious and trivial minds would deny this obvious fact. "41. Obeisances unto you, who are time itself, the shelter of time, and the witness of time in all of its phases. You are the universe, and also its separate observer. You are its creator, and also the totality of all its causes." Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, although appearing in different incarnations, can never be limited by time, since He is time itself, the shelter of time, and the witness of time in all its phases. 42 and 43. Obeisances unto you, who are the ultimate soul of the physical elements, of the subtle basis of perception, of the senses, of the vital air of life, and of the mind, intelligence, and consciousness. By your arrangement, the infinitesimal spirit souls falsely identify with the three modes of material nature, and their perception of your own true self becomes clouded. By your arrangement, the infinitesimal spirit souls falsely identify with the three modes of material nature, and their perception of their own true self thus becomes clouded. I left out the word thus. Sorry. We offer our obeisances unto you, the unlimited Supreme Lord, the supremely subtle one, the omniscient personality of Godhead, who are always fixed in unchanging transcendence, who sanction the opposing views of different philosophies, and who are the power upholding expressed ideas and the words that express them. 44. We offer our obeisances again and again to you, who are the basis of all authoritative evidence, who are the author and ultimate source of the revealed scriptures, and who have manifested yourself in those Vedic literatures, encouraging sense gratification, as well as in those encouraging renunciation of the material world. Purport. If we did not have the powers of perception and cognition, evidence could not be transmitted. And if we had no tendency to believe in particular modes of evidence, persuasion could not take place. All of these processes, perception, cognition, persuasion, and transmission, all of these all of these processes, perception, cognition, persuasion, and transmission, take place through the various potencies of the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord Krishna is himself the greatest scholar and intellectual being. He manifests the transcendental scriptures within the hearts of great devotees like Brahma and Narada. And in addition, he incarnates as Vedavyas, the compiler of all Vedic knowledge. In multifarious ways, the Lord generates a variety of religious scriptures which gradually bring the conditioned souls through the various phases of re-entry into the kingdom of God. 45. We offer our obeisances to Lord Krishna and Lord Rama, the sons of Vasudeva, and to Lord Pradyumna and Lord Aniruddha. We offer our respectful obeisances unto the master of all the saintly devotees of Vishnu. 46. Obeisances to you, O Lord, who manifest varieties of material and spiritual qualities. You disguise yourself with the material qualities, and yet the functioning of those same material qualities ultimately reveals your existence. Well, you stand apart from the material qualities as a witness and can be fully known only by your devotees. Purport. The word guna conveys various meanings. The three basic qualities of material nature, that is, goodness, passion, and ignorance. Excellent qualities one manifests because of piety and spiritual achievement, or the internal senses, such as the mind and intelligence. The word pradipaya means unto him who manifests or illumines. Thus here the Nagapatnis are addressing the Supreme Lord as he who manifests all material and spiritual qualities, and who causes the living entities to be conscious. One can see the Lord by going beyond the screen of material nature, and therefore he is called Gunatma Chadanaya. If one methodically and intelligently studies the functioning of the material qualities, he will ultimately conclude that there is a Supreme Personality of Godhead and that he exhibits his illusory potency to bewilder those who do not surrender unto him. The Lord is never affected by the modes of nature, being their witness, and thus he is called Guna Drashtre. The word swa indicates one's own, and the swa sambhire means that Lord Krishna can be known only by his own people, the devotees, and also that ultimately only the Lord can know himself perfectly. Therefore, we should take Lord Krishna's instructions in Bhagavad Gita and immediately come to the right conclusion: full surrender to the Lord's lotus feet. Thus, we should humbly glorify the Lord, following the foot example of the Nagapatnis. Okay. How many more verses do we have in this chapter?
16.
How many?
16.
16, that's too many. We'll stop here. Yeah. We're going to stop our reading tonight. That puts us at about an hour. How is the recording doing? Okay? Fine? Every once in a while I see you looking over concernedly at it, and I was wondering.
Yeah, because my mine was going quite slowly, so I just wanted to check that yours was okay. I think maybe because it's Friday night and more traffic.
Yeah. It's okay.
Looks like it. When Mother Raki Manjari is watching, I think she would have mentioned it if there was...
Ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to that wonderful time of the evening. It's so nice. We say the wonderful time of the evening because it happens every evening. This reading. The magic open mic session in which the devotees get to churn the nectar we've just heard and churn it into its tsunami of bliss. Oh, look. They've arrived. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Dalnitai Prabhu and his lovely wife, Sri Radhananda Devi Dasi, have arrived, and look, brought me this lovely garland. Thank you so much. We've just heard about the bashing of Kaliyah's hoods by the lotus feet, the tender, delicate lotus feet of Krishna, who the gopis are always praying won't get damaged in the forest, have just finished dashing the heads of the Kaliyah serpent, dancing, exhibiting the fine art of dancing in a way that smashes Kaliyah to smithereens. Well, Hare Krishna. Fancy meeting you here. Hare Krishna. Are you meditating on your father and getting him to where he's supposed to be? Oh, good. You're not going to come and sit down, you're just going to stand over there? I remember she does that, she likes to stand up. Okay. So now we've arrived at our open mic session. I'm sorry that you don't have the benefit of having heard what we've heard so far for the last hour, but I'm sure you're well capable of. It's nice to see you. Hare Krishna. Very nice. Okay. The ball, as they say in the art of tennis, is in your court.
It's very so much taste in that. Like when he climbs up on the tree and adjusts his clothing and ties his hair back and then jumps into the water and it creates a tsunami. So it's simultaneously he's God because he can do such a thing. But at the same time he prepares himself as if, it's a big thing for him.
Dramatic actor.
Yeah.
Putting on a shoe. Yeah. This is the charm of the Vrindavan pastime. There's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. There's one story in the Puranas which describes how when Sita and Ram were going through the forest in exile, they came upon this big stack of bones. And Ramachandra was shocked. So he asked he knows everything, but he was acting like a human being, so he had to ask, what is this? And the sages told him, these are the bones of Brahmins and rishis and sages in the forest that were killed by these rakshas and demons. And then Ramachandra immediately took an arrow out of his quiver, put it on his bow, and his eyes got red, and he said, I will kill them all. And Sita was sitting over there, the female lady. Oh, you can't do that. And according to this Purana, Lord Ramachandra said, well, I'm sorry, but the nature of my words is that they have to come true, so it's too late. And she said, all right, then the next time we come here, I'll make sure that you don't do any violence, And he just shrugged. And then next time they appeared was Radha and Krishna. And so then here's Krishna, like a little boy, going around and killing all these demons with his bare hands, or in some ways, expanding his body or whatever he does. And then Radharani catches him up. She says, look, you told me that you weren't going to do any of this violence. He said, no, I just said I wasn't going to use any weapons. Do you see any weapons here? And she goes, oh, next time when you come in again, I'm coming inside your body. and I'll make sure that you never do it anymore. I thought that was a pretty nice story. So that's, part of what makes pastimes in Vrindavan so relishable, because everything he does is so charming. Even though he's killing some of the biggest demons in the universe, so casually and like just a child play. I don't know if you heard this, but I heard this from Gopi, that he gets so absorbed in playing with his friends that he forgets about lunch. So the pastime energy arranges for the demons to come just at about lunchtime. So they have to stop playing, and then they all realize that they're hungry, and then they take lunch. And the same thing happens when it's time to go home. They get so absorbed in their play that they forget that it's time to go home. So a demon comes and interrupts their play, so then they can realize, oh, the sun's going down, we have to go. So charming. Inconceivable.
Totally absorbed in playing. I
Yeah.
did not realize what the time was arrived or
Yes.
something or anything.
Exactly.
And it's just really real. And when you read about Krishna, that this is what Krishna does, that you can remember, yes, I did that as well.
Yeah, I mean, no other reason, just because you want to do it. There's no work involved, there's no, fruit in that sense involved. You're just kids, like they play. They play and they don't just sit around. Kids play, just move around things. The definition of happiness, just play. Unlimitedly charming activities of Krishna. You weren't here, but we had a session, or maybe you listened, I don't know.
No, we didn't.
Huh?
On the way we didn't.
No, I'm not saying, this is a few days ago. And the battery went out. First night we were here, second night?
Mm-hmm.
And so that we had to switch over to another phone, and then we had to, you understand, then we had to put the phone. And in figuring out, we couldn't figure out how to get that, second recording onto our fan page, onto this phone, or into the fan page. So we called up Davide. And Davide, he's got 2 babies now, him and Ragaleka, and they're pretty absorbed in their pastimes of taking care of these kids. They don't plug in as much as they used to, let's put it that way. And he was going through in his account, his own account. He got more accessibility, and also he has a desktop computer, so it's easier to move around and see things. And he said, Maharaj, I didn't realize how much you've actually recorded, because he hasn't paid attention for a long time. And he said, it won't be long before you'll have the whole Bhagavatam recorded for posterity in this way, in this charming venue, And he said, that's a real product. We should figure out some way to make that product available in different ways to the world, to the devotee world especially. So I'm thinking now how to do that, and I'm going to talk to Vaisheshika Prabhu about it, because he is now full-time, or a full BBT trustee, and his portfolio isn't publishing, but it is, communication and marketing and things like that. So let's see. It's all copyrighted material. I can't just do something on my own. Maybe I can, I don't know. Anyway, Hare Krishna.
What about the YouTube channel?
Yeah, the YouTube channel is there.
Okay.
It's just a matter of putting it over. It takes a lot of time because you have to, upload it from one to the other. Depending on the connection, speed of the connection, depending on your device, depending on the whatever. Okay, what else? What else? Let's go. Let's cook it up here. You must have something. And you have to come. Will it reach up? Oh. That's pretty good.
I didn't actually have anything planned, but since I've been given the opportunity...
We don't have anything planned here. You've come into the state of spontaneity here. Yeah, there you go.
So, well, what struck me today, especially while listening to your reading, is how amazing these purports are. They're so delicious, so sweet, and honestly speaking, although I know they're not Prabhupada purports as such, but you can see that they've been empowered by Srila Prabhupada.
I think they are. I think they're the same. I agree with you 100%.
It really struck me today especially.
Yeah. I understood also there are some purports that don't have, or some verses that don't have purports that perhaps but would purport, and maybe that some devotees feel like it could be, feels a little separation from him or something. But yes, it's absolutely clear that they're not just trying to make it sound like Prabhupada, they have that deep commitment, and they often just quote Prabhupada, from the Krishna book. So they're obviously connected, and they're trying really hard to not let Prabhupada down. They're serving Prabhupada very nicely. Absolutely. Topmost glorification of Prabhupada. And how exalted he must be to have empowered and trained devotees to do such a wonderful thing. I thought of that when I was working with Jayadvaita Maharaj and Gopi Paranadhana Prabhu, working on Brihad Bhagavatamrita, and the product was such a gem. It's a masterpiece, actually. And there was this one time when there were 3 contiguous purports which were describing in depth the philosophical background underlying a debate that the personified Vedas, who make up the court of Lord Brahma, were having at the time that Gopakumar became Brahma. And the point came up about whether or not the holy name of Krishna was capable of giving liberation. And the Bhagavatam, these are all personified Vedas. The Srimad-Bhagavatam also has a personified form. And he became indignant. You should not even have to discuss this. And then he walked out. And all the other, they were going to have a debate, right? And then all the scriptures that are in pursuance of the Bhagavatam, they walked out with him. And Gopakumar is just like a 10, 12-year-old boy. He looked at the face of the Bhagavatam and he thought, he knows. So he started to go out, to try to convince him to come back. And there's my memory's a little fuzzy at this point. I don't remember. But one thing I do remember is that the debate was won by the Bhagavatam just by people who were the devotee. I mean, the personified Vedas that stayed back, and he won the debate. And then there were 3 purports contiguously, which we were going over right at the end, because when you edit a book, bring it to the publishable stage, the last stage is you read it out loud, and all the editors and author sit down together and hear it and try to make it as perfect as they can according to their abilities, intelligence. So we were reading through, and it was very intricate philosophy. Sanatana Goswami's famous for seeing things from all different angles of vision. And all of a sudden, Jayadvaita Maharaj said, "Hold it." He said, "Go back 2 purports." And we did. And there was a point that wasn't completely consistent. And so he had him go back to the Sanskrit. Gopi went back to the Sanskrit. He translated literally what the words were, because it was a word that was not so clear. And sure enough, it could be tweaked and adjusted, and then it flowed. Then we read all those 3 purports, and we looked at each other, and each one of us were misty. There were tears coming out of our eyes, just a little bit, corners of our eyes. And I thought at least, that the descending potency comes into devotional service when we are together trying to do anything that Srila Prabhupada wanted, or that the Lord wants, or that any of the acharyas want. I offer that in my humble contribution to your point. That, yes, and anybody who's criticizing it, in my humble opinion, is not hearing it. Because if you are listening too critically, then you can't hear it. This is according to Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, many times, especially towards the end of the book. He says, if you can hear the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya with faith, full faith and love, and without argument, you will experience Lord Chaitanya's presence in the sound. I think that's what Lord Jesus meant when he said, "Let those who have ears hear."
So there was a...
Wait. Sorry, Shamagori is further churning the nectar.
There was one sentence in one of the purports as well, that we have to look at or hear the Lord's pastimes from the spiritual angle, otherwise you don't hear it at all.
It's it. That's the last sentence. Remember, I repeated it.
Yeah, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
How that you were looking for it?
Yeah? Oh, good. So it was very nice.
Very, very nice. How a person who can't actually hear because of their mentality of critical mentality possibly correct them? I don't mean to rub salt into the wound, but it seems pretty obvious. What was that? Dalmora, I'm waiting for him to send me something, but I haven't had time to read it today. I was really busy.
I just happened to stumble upon it during my regular reading.
Oh, I see.
And sent you.
I see.
Some others.
Yeah, there was this one really nice letter that Prabhupada wrote to Hayagriva. Apparently Hayagriva was criticizing Roy Ram, who was not so educated and was assisting in the editing. And Prabhupada wrote this letter. To Roy Ram, January 15th, 1968. Your fear that the entire society will be in danger by Raymond's editing of the Gita is not a very suitable remark. Roy Ram may not be as qualified as you are, but his one qualification, that he is fully surrendered to Krishna and his spiritual master, is the first class recommendation for his editing any one of our literatures. Because editing of Vedic literatures does not depend on academic education. It is clearly stated in the Upanishads that one who has implicit faith in God as well as in the spiritual master, to him only the import of Vedic literature is revealed. That is my proposal. As I said last night, and I'm going to repeat it again, and I don't care if I say it again and again for the rest of my life, that you can't authorize or approve if your mind is too critical, because you can't hear it properly to evaluate it, to review it. Yes, Dharma, you were going to say something.
Well, I was merely going to add.
No, please, hold it. We have to add it through this mic. Bumblebee.
Since this topic has come up, about how the Srila Prabhupada's books need to be authorized by academics, scholars. And it has sent me on a little bit of a mission to see what Prabhupada wrote about this personally in his own purports, since those are the purports which are supposed to be authorized.
Well done, sir.
By such man. And again, I'm finding it difficult to find a place where Prabhupada praises academics, because in 99% of cases he's heavily criticizing them, not just criticizing them, but comparing them to lower animals. There's a couple of examples. Example in this purport here, first canto in 12th chapter, verse number 4. Prabhupada writes, by knowing the science of Krishna, one can become the most perfect in the world. And unless one has knowledge in this science, qualifications and doctorate diplomas, academic education are small and useless. And this theme comes up repeatedly in Prabhupada's purports. There's a very nice one. This is sent to you today. And this is the subject matter of how Krishna consciousness. So on account of a devotee's high grade of Krishna consciousness, even the demigods live with him. And therefore it can be understood that the qualities of the demigods are developed within his body. On the other hand, a person who is not in Krishna consciousness has no good qualities. He may be highly educated from the academic point of view, but in the actual field of his activities, he can be seen to be baser than the animals. Even though a person is highly educated academically, if he cannot go beyond the sphere of mental activities, then he is sure to perform only material activities and thus remain impure. There are so many persons in the modern world who have been highly educated in materialistic universities, but it is seen that they cannot take up the movement of Krishna consciousness and develop the qualities of the demigod.
Nice.
I just thought that added a bit of weight to the point that you're making.
It does, and we don't want to. We don't want to balance statement, because it's when we talk about things in this next time coming up, and it has been discussed very recently, that the Prabhupada did want the devotees to teach this subject in the universities. But I don't remember him ever having asked anyone personally to take up the higher education to the point of PhD, except for Rabindranath Sarup. He gave him an actual order to do it because he was so close to getting it. He had already accomplished almost everything. I think he had like 1 semester or 2 semesters to go, and he asked him to do it. There's a scholar that's leading the charge of this, effort that we're talking about, who has said that Prabhupada, asked him to do, but there's nothing in writing or in, recorded material. I don't know, it may be true. But it's true that Prabhupada wanted the English to be such that it would be favorable, or that the academic scholars could accept it. But he didn't ever say that they should authorize it.
What is their authority?
How could they authorize it? Yeah, exactly. What is their authority to authorize it?
They have no good character.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they may be, like, for instance, Radhika Ramana has gotten his PhD, and he's quite a capable scholar, but he's pure. But the BBT trustees have brought up the point very, very cogently and very strongly that the idea that a group of Vaishnava academics and secular academics can form a board to approve or to adjust Prabhupada's purports is, I think, ludicrous in its face. I don't think that's possible. But if, Radhika Ramana, which, by the way, the BBT trustees decided to have that kind of board with personalities like Radhika Ramana and Krishna Chaitanya Swami, and persons who are actually loyal and in the line, have been in the movement and pure in their behavior, in their morals and spiritual values, without any doubt. Yes.
It's just a very short question. Maybe what would be the purpose of such a board of the academic?
Because there's a couple of PhDs who are devotees who are trying to soothe the agitation that's being created by some devotees, dissatisfaction with the fact that Prabhupada's books have been edited posthumously. And they think that, they haven't brought anything forward in terms of a written policy anywhere by any publisher. And Jayadvaita Maharaj has brought up examples of publishers who were very happy to receive posthumously corrections from personalities who were very close to the author. For instance, Tolkien, the Lord of the Rings, his son or nephew, somebody close to the family, found his original manuscript and found that there were some words that needed to be brought back to the original. And the publishers, and this is very heavy. These people take this book as like a scripture practically. They learn Middle English and all these things that are there. Have clubs and yatras, I guess you could say, you know. So there are, and then, anyway, there's all kinds of very clear disputes of the claims of what the process should be. And also, I must say that I have some personal experience on this that I would like to offer to the discussion as soon as I get an opportunity. I'm going to write something. I already did write something. But when Jayadvaita Maharaj and I stayed in the same room together in Vrindavan for the last month before Prabhupada left. And you'll see these famous, videos where he has the dictaphone right next to Prabhupada's mouth and he's speaking. He's translating. Juman is there reading the Sanskrit and he's translating Prabhupada to Sanskrit in that last part of the 13th chapter that by Radharaman's mercy, we kept going late, even though there were a couple of really long purports that he just slipped his vision. So nice. And those purports were like gems. And Jayadvaita Maharaj told me, because I was staying in the same room, and he says, these don't need any editing. They were like so powerful and perfect, which shows how he's not editing anything that doesn't need to be edited. But then the other thing is that Prabhupada had all opportunity at that time, for a month before, to tell Jayadvaita Maharaj, who had the instruction coming through Pradyumna in a letter, that letter is in our family business, which you can read if you'd like, at your pleasure, that asked to make lists of English mistakes or things that needed to be improved, and then correct future editions. And he never took it back, that instruction. You can talk to those who were there. Gopi Puranam was there, Jayadvaita Maharaj was there, Devamrita Maharaj was there, Dravida was there, and others. And he never took that back. So that was their service. It is their service to Prabhupada, authorized by the author. So it's not actually, in a sense, not posthumous editing, but it's carrying on the service that Prabhupada gave them. So I don't believe that these people have the right to stop a person's, Srila Prabhupada's, instruction in the form of devotional service, to stop doing that. And then as I read last night, I guess I'm into this, I'm pretty absorbed in this subject matter actually. Can't stop thinking about it, can't stop talking about it. There's this famous purport, last volume of the Madhya-lila. That's it, you've got it, thank you. Just 3 months ago, April 22nd, how many months ago is that? May, June, July, August, 5 months. Just 5 months ago, Jayadvaita Maharaj, who was the person that mainly is being criticized, found this gem. Now we have a teacher of English in the room now, Dial Nitai. And we're going to read this to you,
Okay.
and you're going to tell us where the mistake is. There's a mistake in this book, the published Chaitanya Charitamrita, which, by the way, was published so fast, 15 volumes in 2 months, plus 2 volumes of the 5th canto of Bhagavatam. At that time it was 2 volumes. 17 volumes were produced from the scratch to the publishable stage in 2 months. And when Prabhupada said that's what they had to do, because they were so far behind, he was furious. Ramaswara said, Srila Prabhupada, that's impossible. And Prabhupada looked, it was on a morning walk, and he stopped, and Prabhupada said, impossible is a word in the Fool's Dictionary. And then he just kept walking. And, Ramaswara and Radhaballabha, who were the main BBT people there. They were just stunned. And all the devotees going, yeah, it's impossible, you have to do it, You can imagine, right in front of Prabhupada? My God. So anyway, this was 35 years later, no, 36, but, 76 to 39 years later. This is the verse. Ready? The atheists, headed by the Mayavadi philosophers, do not care for liberation or Krishna's mercy. They simply continue to put forward false arguments and counter theories to atheistic philosophy, not considering or engaging in spiritual matters. I'll give you 3 seconds to figure it out. No. Read it again.
Well, maybe yes, please.
Oh, you got it already?
No, I heard it before. But
Oh, you heard me say it before you already know the answer. Oh, that's unfair. I'm cheating.
Wait. But I would like to hear it again if it were.
I would be delighted to read it again.
Please.
See if you would think that this should stay in Prabhupada's book. The atheists, headed by the Mayavadi philosophers, do not care for liberation or Krishna's mercy. They simply continue to put forward false arguments and counter theories to atheistic philosophy, not considering or engaging in spiritual matters. You're a communicator.
I heard you say it before.
Huh?
I heard you say it.
Oh, she already knows. I'm doing it again. I'm just making a fool out of myself.
No, it's
Remember?
it's totally amazing that it seems that nobody ever noticed it for all these years.
Yeah.
That's
It's
quite
completely amazing. And the person that fixed it is Jayadvaita Maharaj. And there's a kind of theory that's being floated around that I said last night, and I'm going to say it again because I'm so absorbed in this topic, that, Jayadvaita Maharaj does not have the authority to posthumous edit anything but, or ever actually, but copy editing, not content editing. I mean, Prabhupada, when he gave the instruction to Hayagriva, that and it's in writing, by the way, both in letter and in Hayagriva's book, he wanted he wanted his books edited for force and clarity. So then the purported authorities, scholars, who are objecting to the posthumous editing, or even the editing that was done, are saying that Jayadvaita Maharaj is not capable of doing more than, or shouldn't be capable of doing more than copy editing, which has nothing to do with content editing. And here is a quote from Cambridge University Press Authority. According to Butcher's copy editing, despite the unfortunate name, it's the editorial authority for Cambridge University Press, which is one of the top publishers in the academic world. Copy editing includes, quote, detailed editing for sense, end quote, which, quote, is concerned with whether each section expresses the author's meaning clearly, without gaps and contradictions. This is exactly what Prabhupada asked him to do. It involves looking at each sentence, the author's choice of words, and so on, according to the Society for, and then, according to the Society for Editors and Proofreaders in the UK, quote, copy editing may even go so far as to include substantive development editing, in which reconstruction and rewriting are necessary in order to adapt the method for its defined market. So the persons who are objecting have not put forward any official professional standards, and the BBT trustees have found these, which Chaitanya Maharaj knows all about this. This is coming from Chaitanya Maharaj, without a doubt. So there you have it, airtight refutation of the proposal.
I think I would have a question on
Yes, please.
related to the topic of
Yes, please.
is I'm a little insecure how to put it. Thank you. So sometimes what Srila Prabhupada presents in his books, I mean, maybe I should give a short background. Recently we Shruta Kirti Prabhu, he was traveling in Belgium. We went to see him one evening, hear him speak one evening, and he gave the example that Srila Prabhupada in his books, he's totally uncompromising. But Srila Prabhupada, dealing with his disciples in daily life, was turned out to be very compromising in the sense to not discourage anyone.
Yes.
Yeah. So sometimes in the text there's very strong statements which people who are not,
If they take them out of context,
or when they're not initiated in the culture,
yeah, if they can't hear them in context.
then when I hear you say that disciples have got the instruction, blessing, the right to edit for clarity and forcefulness.
Well, it's not all. That's not the only. He also said that Arsha Prayoga must be respected. Arsha Prayoga means if the Acharya says something that's not necessarily exactly right, it should be left alone. So the BBT editors have diligently applied both those principles, and therefore it leaves the solution to that problem is to write and explain, the proper context in those kinds of things. Either by critical editions, which explain in footnotes and things like that. So these things are all being described, all being considered by the BBT trustees, and they will be done. The famous rape is being changed, being edited, because some of the words that Prabhupada was using, he was educated in Scottish Church College many, many years ago, and some of the words that now mean something didn't mean the same thing then. So as language changes, and that's one of the reasons why there has to be editing, posthumous editing. One of the reasons. But on the other hand, I just heard Srila Prabhupada discussing in a morning walk with his leading devotees, and Tamal Krishna was there, by the way, in 1976. This is towards the end. That his success was that he didn't compromise ever on principles that were actually destroying human society. So the kinds of things that disturb people's minds, which actually are resulting in the degradation of human society and the destruction of human society, should not be compromised on. Whereas if a word or a phrase is actually not the way he intended it, then it should be edited.
And is there an existing opposition to the proposal?
Say that again?
Is there an existing opposition to the proposal to do at those footnotes and?
The BBT trustee threadbare with the most precise and careful and diligent, and also knowledgeable and experienced ways. But it is a very delicate issue for the very reason that these scholars are complaining. It's a very delicate issue, because you can't change the content, but you have to put it in words that make it clear and make it, and also attractive. But there are things that will never be attractive, that should not be changed just because it's going to make it attractive to a culture that has become so degraded that things have become popular that are abhorrent. And it is not our business to ban or to fiddle with Prabhupada's words, ideas that actually, if they're not accepted without compromise, will continue to give fuel to the fire of degradation of human society, including the women's issue. There was one, he said in this same morning walk I was listening to just the other day, somebody was complaining. She was the wife of Dr. it was Dr. Mishra's secretary. And she was saying how in the Vedic culture the women were slaves. And Prabhupada immediately said, better she be slave to one man than 100 men. And
I read recently that Mahabharata, passages of Mahabharata are now being rewritten from the perspective of the ladies.
Yes. In order to make sure that the degradation is complete. To make sure that the degradation, but Prabhupada would not do that.
I'm sure he would.
He would never do that. And as a result, he told us, I was in the room when he told us this, that there will come a time when millions of people will come to us for shelter if we don't compromise in these points. I don't know if you know this, but there is a trend in young people in America right now toward going away from illicit sex and premarital sex and these things and divorce. There's a trend. It's not saying that it's, but the percentages are going down with the latest generation because they're watching these rascals and fools, leaders, and their parents, even. So you can't knee-jerk react to these things the way the culture is now, and change something in the books that is going to precipitate it more or contribute to the degradation. It's not possible. But there are things that are going to be adjusted, either through a footnote or through an actual edit. Shall I give you an example? I'm not sure if I can find it so quickly. It was sent to me by Kishori. Maybe I can find it quickly. It's not there. Maybe it's in this other. I may or may not be able to find this right away, but I will try. Okay. No. One other place. Then we got to stop. It's getting late. One more place. This is the proposed edit for that verse or purport. Just to give you an idea. It's going to take too long, sorry. It's a long time ago I read this. It's going to take too long to find. Yeah. No. Can't find them. Anyway, there's a very nice edit proposed for that, and I think the BBT trustees might have already approved it, I'm not sure. But that kind of thing will be changed, but not the kinds of things that, can be explained easily. I'll give you examples. When I'm reading these books, I'm reading the purports, and I'm not leaving anything out, not one thing out, And sometimes we have a number of young college students who are very, very, sensitive on these issues. And when I come to one of those statements, I just look at them and see how they're responding. And if they've got a look on their face that I can tell that it's bothering them, I said, let's discuss this. And I explain what Prabhupada's vision of women are in the Vedic culture. How they are highly esteemed to the point where they are worshipped. And they're not to be polluted, and they're not to be, degraded or insulted or in any way, because they are the source of good population. And every time I've done this, they all become satisfied. Every time. I'm talking about young people, college people. So there may be a sense to knee-jerk response according to our own perhaps prejudice or fear or lack of faith. But the movement spread like wildfire at a time when these kinds of things were sensitive. And the movement spread like wildfire among young Western people. And now it's not spreading as fast among young Western people as it was before. And I might suggest that one of the reasons is that we do compromise too much in our own minds. Thank you.
I disagree.
Thank you.
The truth has potency.
Thank you. I'm just acknowledging the support and fastidiousness of your hearing.
Couldn't agree more.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to draw down the curtain of this version of the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books on this holy day of the 27th of September 2019 in the holy Olive Tree College, Hode Farm, halfway between Folkestone and Canterbury, in that holy land of Kent, southeast England. We thank all of you for attending, and we hope that these comments that we've been making lately will edify you and increase your faith in the Srimad-Bhagavatam and in Srila Prabhupada's position and authority and expertise. He knows what he's doing. Kaliyah Serpent ki jai. Sri Krishna Kaliyah Serpent ki jai. Leela ki jai. Gaur Premanandi. See you tomorrow night. Same time, same place, same space. And I was thinking, while we were I should have said it actually, but
Still
still going. Yeah, one last thing I'll say, that when Krishna was dashing Kaliyah serpents and on his heads, and all this vomit poison was coming out of his mouth, and finally when the poison did come out, then he thought to surrender to Krishna. And for this reason, Prabhupada never compromised. And he says, my strength, my only strength, is I don't change what my spiritual master said, and I don't compromise with the materialists. Hare Krishna. See you tomorrow. Hare